welcome to our class today. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about why business communications is important. So we'll have two separate videos, one for chapter 1 and one for chapter 2. So I have the screenshot behind me so you can follow along as we kind of walk through it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why business communications is so important and what it means to be a good and effective communicator. So first of all, communications is how we make sure that we get things done. It's how we communicate, for a lack of a better word. It's how we emphasize things. It's how we put across what's important to us. It's how we explain how to get things done. So communications, it's such a broad topic and it entails so much. And so you can only imagine that there are different ways of communicating. Of course, there's interpersonal communications, which is a little bit more intimate and personal. There's communicating in a work setting, which may not always be exactly business communications because you're going to interact with different coworkers differently. And then, of course, there's professional or business communications. And so that's, of course, what this class is going to focus on is how we communicate effectively in our business environment. And the cool thing about business communications is that it takes on many forms. So we will also participate in some various forms of communication. So there is emails, memos, group presentations, PowerPoint presentations, brochures, infographics, videos, YouTube, TED Talks. There's all kinds of ways that people communicate nowadays. And communication is so very, very important. Make this a little bit bigger here. Okay, so why is it important to be a skilled communicator? Okay, so this behind me is our online textbook, and it is a very awesome resource. A lot of the stuff in here will be hyperlinked, and so make sure that you click on the hyperlinks as you go through, okay? So let's just kind of go through it. This is going to be one of the best courses that you're going to take throughout your whole college experience. And not best because it's, me teaching it, but best just because it's, or maybe more useful is the more appropriate words to use. It's going to be incredibly useful in all of your classes because it's going to teach you concepts of how to effectively communicate in written form, verbal form, audio form, visual form, and why different ways of communicating in those genres is important and how to perfect your skills in each of those different areas, okay? So we spend about 70% of our time that we're awake talking to other people or communicating in some fashion. And so it's very important to do that effectively. And I realize that I say so very often, and that is something that I am trying to work on to get that word out of my vocabulary. See, I almost said it again. And I can't even think of another word to replace it. I was going to say so, please excuse it, but okay, whatever. Moving on. Business communications, like I said, comes in many different forms. Writing is probably the most utilized, especially now that we communicate electronically. So email is super important, and making sure that you communicate effectively. And a lot of times in an email, it's frustrating because context is missing sometimes, or tone is missing sometimes. And it can often be miscommunicated, misunderstood, misinterpreted. That is why it's very important to be very clear when you're communicating via email or, well, any type of communication. It's very, very important to be very clear, to say what you mean without all the fluff. Let's see. So, writing to be understood. Here's another thing talking about why it's important to be concise. So, a lot of times you can take a huge passage and you can sum it up in maybe one or two sentences. Very, very important to understand what the fluff is and take that out so that you don't confuse people or that the message doesn't get lost. Okay, so there is a great website here called plainlanguage.gov, and it gives you some great examples of how to take out fluff. So that you might want to pop in there and check that out. And then this just says a sentence should contain no unnecessary words, a paragraph, no unnecessary sentences, and this for the same reason that a drawing should not have any unnecessary lines, or a machine should have no unnecessary parts. Okay? So it's just telling you to kind of take out anything that's not important and focus on what's important. So who's your audience? When you're writing, you need, or communicating in any way, you need to know who your audience is and what's important to them. Now, of course, you're not going to always have a group of people who all have the same goals and hopes for getting out of what you're writing. So it's very important to make sure that you not only are concise, but that you are using correct words, that you're describing things in a way that people are going to understand. So what I'm saying that is when you concise it, when you make it, when you shrink it down, when you are concise in your presentation, what that will do is that will give a busy person time to just scan over, get the main points, and be done. And that's usually what they're looking for. For a person who's more of an analytical reader, they will see what the points are, and they'll be able to see that you've deduced the reasoning for it. When you're talking with an international person, if you have too much fluff in there, sometimes the message could get lost a little bit. And this is especially true when we decide to put in our own little idioms from our own language and little slang. So it's important to stay away from those types of things because you can lose members of international audiences or audiences who are unfamiliar with the context of the verbiage. Okay. You also want to make your message decisive. Well, decisive people don't want to waste time, and so you want to make it very clear for them so that they understand and they're able to process through very, very easily. Okay. Another reason it's important to be an effective communicator is because you can set yourself up for a good employment in the future. You can click on, there's some links here talking about different ways that you can communicate and effective communicating styles. So yeah, please click through on some of these links. They have some great resources. A lot of times people will get promoted because they're effective and good at their jobs. And being an effective communicator will definitely go a long way in letting your bosses know that you understand and that you are able to tell a story, get across a point of what needs to be done. So it will definitely help you. A lot of times when people are hiring, looking for a new candidate to hire, your resume is going to say a lot about you. If your formatting is off or your bubbles are wrong and you state in your resume that you are a stickler for detail, but then you produce a product that isn't detailed, that can kind of mark against you. And so if they're looking at you and somebody else and their resume is perfect and yours is not, chances are they'll probably go with, like if everything else is the same, they would probably go with that other candidate because they would feel there's less training that needs to be involved in that. Okay. Another thing you want to remember when you're creating your resume, and we'll be doing that later on, is that you want to effectively communicate different skill sets that you have. Okay, they like to see that you have problem solving skills, that you're a team player, that you have a strong work ethic, but a lot of those things are hard to judge on a resume. Okay, so where those become judgeable is in the quality of your writing on your resume, the quality of the words that you use, the conciseness of the words that you use. So writing, can't stress enough how important it is. Alrighty. And then, of course, becoming a leader. When you are a leader, you have to be able to effectively communicate your ideas, the ideas of your supervisors. You have to be able to pass those on to the people that you lead. You have to also be able to build trust. Communication is a lot about trust as well. So when you're speaking to your workers that that you're leading, if you tend to not give the whole truth, not give all the parts of the information, or if you maybe omit some things and then the people find out later, they're going to kind of lose trust in you. So it's very important that you're a clear, concise communicator as a leader, and that you help build that trust with those that you lead by being inclusive in the information. Now, of course, the information that you're given as a leader doesn't always need to all be disseminated to those that you lead. But if it affects their daily procedures, it absolutely does. So becoming an effective communicator as a leader, usually leaders are already good, effective communicators, and that's part of the reason they are where they are. If you're a bad communicator, chances are you'll probably struggle. You may climb, but you might struggle. So, all right, moving on. Okay, and then section 4 talks about staying connected, how communications is a way for all of us to build relationships, to become part of a bigger part of our community. So we have our neighbors, we have our friends, we have our family relationships, we have our colleague relationships, we have our leadership relationships. So it's very important to be able to be a good communicator, also being a good listener. Staying connected has a little bit more to do with the listening side and the trying to understand side than how you outwardly communicate. It's how you are inwardly communicating with others, how you're receiving information, and then what you do with that, how you process it, and then how you reciprocate that. So it is very important that we learn to listen. And I would say one skill that I feel that I've become very good at is, and I found is super important and has been very helpful to me, is that I can listen to somebody and I can hear what they're saying, like with half of my brain, and the other half of my brain is kind of troubleshooting what they're saying. So as they're saying something, I'm thinking, okay, this is our problem? Is this the best solution? And if not, how could we tweak that to be a better solution? So I'm a very active listener, and I will listen to what they're saying, but at the same time, I'm processing and I am figuring out more or ways to improve on what's going on and what's being said or what needs to happen. And I think that a lot of times you encounter people who have to think a long time about things, and there's nothing wrong with that because it's a very common trait in most people. Most personality types, or not most personality types, but one group of personality types that's kind of their key characteristic, that they have to absorb the information, go away from the situation and think about it. But sometimes you don't always have that opportunity. So it becomes very important to be a very critical and innovative thinker and listener so that you can dissect what they're thinking or what they're saying as they're speaking, but still being able to listen to them. I know it sounds a little confusing, but next time you have a conversation with somebody about something, try and do that. Listen to what they're saying, but also be thinking about what they're saying and think about not so much your comeback, but thinking about dissecting what they're saying. And so then when it's your turn to give your side of it or your information, what you would do, how you would present that information. Okay? Just a little fun little activity for you to try. So in conclusion, it just says practicing good, concise communication and direct communication, you'll become a more effective communicator. You'll be more effective in business communications, and you'll be more connected to the people around you, to the community around you, to those that are listening to you. And hopefully it will help you in your leadership role, whatever that will be in the future, because all of you, I'm sure, have either been in leadership positions or are going to be in leadership positions. And so effectively communicating things will definitely help you in that vein. All right, so I just wanted to show you on the bottom of this video, there are some different things that you can read, different articles. I haven't pinpointed any that I'd like you to read yet for this week. I may pick out one or two later on just for you to read and kind of put in a comment. But if you want to get some good examples of effective communication or how not to be an effective communicator, there's some really good articles in here. All right, so I'll see you on video 2.